Is Christian Encarnacion-Strand just a role player? Who has the most to prove in Goodyear this year amongst the Reds spring training invites? And what viewer will ask the best question? Find out all that and more right now on today's Aloha Live Friday edition of Locked On Reds. Let's go.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, I'm on mute. You are Locked On Reds. Thanks so much for joining us here today on this live Aloha edition of the podcast. My name is Jeff Carr. His name is Steve Offenbaker, and we are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans that have turned an addiction into information for you. Want to thank you for taking time out of your day on this Friday, this afternoon, to talk some Reds with us this snowy afternoon in Ohio. Yeah, Steve, we don't care about the weather in Hawaii. Pipe down already, will you? But when it comes to this team, you can trust that we're going to be talking Reds every single day, all throughout the season. So thanks for making us part of your day. If you're an everydayer, I want to thank you specifically. You are the reason why we do this. And if you're not an everydayer, what are you doing? Make sure you become an everydayer right now. Today on the podcast, we are going to look at the invites to spring training. There were a couple of prospects that got the invite, got the call, as it were, to go to Goodyear for the big league camp. We're going to talk about who has the most to prove out of that group. We're going to look at this roster projection, these starters that MLB Network has projected, and they missed two guys. I'm very curious as to why CES and Nick Lodolo were snubbed the way that they were. And then, of course, we will get into your questions and comments later on in the show. Before we get to all of that, I want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today and use promo code Locked On to save $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Steve, where we want to start with is the Reds have invited a number of prospects to spring training, a couple of guys that we at some point this season expect to see in some capacity. So when you look at this list, who has the most to prove?
That's a really hard question to answer because I don't know that it's about proving as much as it is who has the most to gain from a great performance in Goodyear to start spring training amongst the invites. And for me, it's the guy that I keep banging the drum and saying I don't want him anywhere near the major leagues in 2024, and that's Rett Louder. I think he is the guy that could go in to Goodyear and really make it difficult for the Reds if he's just lights out. Because there are a million reasons that say the smart thing to do with him, no matter what happens in Arizona, is send him off to AAA. I mean, his arm is not conditioned to a major league season. He's not thrown that many innings. He's coming off arm injuries. He's super young, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But listen, I know these Reds fans because I'm one of them. And I know, like, they'll feel like I'll feel if he's lights out, Jeff. I'm going to be like, I want to see that dude. I want to see him in Cincinnati. Let's go. So I think he has the most to gain from a tremendous spring training effort.
He really does. And you look at this group, there are 8 players in total that got the invite from the prospect side of things for the Reds. You had 4 pitchers and 4 position players. You had Rett Louder. You also have Chase Petty, Zach Maxwell, who I think I've been reading before, kind of projects to be more of a bullpen guy. And then Julian Aguiar, who he's a little bit lower down in the minor leagues and earlier on in his minor league career than some of these guys. But when it comes to this list, a lot of talent on the pitching side. Then you go over to the position players. You have catcher Michael Troutwine. You have 2 infielders in Edwin Arroyo and Tyler Callahan. Callahan's a guy, that's a name that we remember from years past, but he's kind of fallen off the prospect list a little bit. And then you have an outfielder, a guy that we talked about a little bit this offseason, Blake Dunn. Probably the biggest argument to Rett Louder as much as who has the most to gain from a hot spring training. But I think you're right. I think like if you were to rank these prospects that are getting the big league invite, it's Rett Louder number 1, Blake Dunn number 2, as far as who is closest to the major leagues. And then you probably see it's probably a toss-up between Zach Maxwell and Tyler Callahan, just because Tyler Callahan's getting up there as far as years in the minor leagues and stuff like that. And then Chase Petty is an outlier. I don't think that he's going to make it to the major leagues this season, but I'm with you. I think that Rett Louder is the guy that has the most to gain from all of this because he's coming in so hot out of college. Wake Forest is very much known for its pitching lab and the way that it's able to develop pitchers. And a lot of folks, like if you ask our friend Lindsey Crosby over at Locked On MLB Prospects, pitchers come out of Wake Forest almost like ready to hit the ground running in the major leagues.
And I temper that expectation though, because man, I don't want to give this guy the Hunter Green treatment, but it doesn't take into account those other things, the arm strain that was already there. The fact that the Reds didn't let him pitch last year, once they got him, they didn't let him pitch a single solitary inning. All of those things make me want to proceed with caution. And I think the Reds are in a position that if they really truly get to a point that they need him, this 2024 season has been a disaster. There are so many other names on that list that I really want him to go have a lights out spring and then be put on a pitch management program throughout the entire season. But I think even if the Reds were to tell him, like I've been saying, that you're not going to make the major leagues in 2024, there's still a lot for him to gain from having a successful spring training, because it will set the table for 2025. And that's really where I think the Reds are going to see him in the rotation. Beginning of 2025. I expect him to be in the rotation, not the opening day starter, but from the time the team breaks camp 2025. So this 2024 spring training has a lot of upside for him. And to your point on Blake Dunn, I think you're right in that if we're going to do this pitcher position player, Blake Dunn is the guy that has the most to gain from a really solid spring, because we've been asking the question, who is going to be that next outfielder? Neither one of us think it's Stuart Fairchild. Neither one of us think that the long-term solution to the outfield currently exists on the major league roster. We've talked about patchwork options, right? Well, maybe CES could play out there a little bit. Maybe Jonathan India could be serviceable. Blake Dunn could play himself into being the long-term solution in the Reds outfield.
And by solution in the outfield, you mean right-handed bat solution. Will Benson probably figures to be long-term on the left-handed side, but yes, you need a right-handed side of the platoon for Will Benson. And yeah, Blake Dunn could be that guy. And I want to stress too, we're not talking about look at their stats in spring training. There's a lot of eye test that goes into evaluating spring training performances. How do they look? Do they look overmatched? Do they look like they're just up there getting lucky? Because there are so many players that we can talk about who had amazing spring training statistics that didn't amount to a hill of beans during the regular season, looking at the Neftali Sotos of the world, that when it comes to the numbers, don't get overbent on how their batting average looks or what their ERA is. That doesn't matter. Spring training stats don't matter. It's all about how they evaluate the eye test, and that's really where the scouts, the position coaches, the former players that they bring back to spring training to kind of be like advisors and stuff like that. That's where those guys make their money, because that's what they rely on, is how those guys evaluate their performances.
That's true. I mean, if we were using the spring training statistics to make our decisions, Amir Garrett would be a Hall of Famer. He struck out every guy he faced.
He'd be getting that Josh Hader money right now.
Exactly. Man, what a lot of $95 million for Hader. I don't know if you guys saw that. 5 years for Houston, $95 million. Yeah. He was never going to be a Red. So
no, no, he was not.
So Jeff, there, outside of those two guys, is there anybody else you want to talk about here real quick with another minute?
Not on this prospect list. I've seen some names, some folks talking about some different guys who have a lot that they can kind of prove in spring training. I do think that there is some non-roster guys who could at least put themselves on the depth chart. I don't think Justin Bruihl can make the 26-man roster. He is another left-handed guy. He's a non-roster invite. If you didn't see that, he is a minor league signing with an invite to spring training, left-handed relief pitcher. The Reds have Sam Moll and Brent Suter. If they have three lefties in the bullpen, that'd be kind of cool, but that also means that there's one of those other 8 guys that is not going to make it, and I just don't see Justin Bruihl breaking into the top 8 right now. Could he be 9, 10, 11, something like that? That's where spring training is going to prove for him. And then I also saw someone put in Noelvi Marte's name. I kind of want to see Noelvi Marte come hell or high water at third base. Like, I think he's got the talent. I don't know what more he can show in spring training. I think it's just he's got to keep getting the reps in the regular season. But I know this, the 8 prospects that the Reds have invited to this, it's Rett Louder, Blake Dunn, got a lot that they can gain from a really nice spring training. So I'm very excited to see him. I'm excited to see all these guys, especially Julian Aguilar. I think he's still a little bit ways down the road when it comes to his major league clock, but he's shown a lot of talent at the Reds' lower levels. And if he can keep doing that, he's going to be, he's going to be in the rotation conversation coming up here pretty soon.
Well, one thing's for sure, Jeff. Spring training 2024 is going to mean more than spring training has meant in a long, long time. And a lot of guys are going to have the opportunity to prove a lot of things. It's going to be a ton of fun to watch. All right. I don't know if you saw this or not, Jeff, but CES and Nick Lodolo were both snubbed by some national talking heads, and it created for a very interesting pair of graphics that have been circulating around social media. Coming up next, we are going to discuss whether or not CES and Nick Lodolo are just part-time pieces for the Cincinnati Reds. I think we all know the answer to that, but we're going to dig into it coming up next. Before we get to that, I want to shout out the sponsor of today's podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time has plenty of last-minute tickets to your favorite team. They also make it easy to get in the gate with flash deals and zone deals. Game Time makes it easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. They've got the views from all seats in the venue. Game Time, they have the lowest price guaranteed. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On. That's promo code Locked On to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, you can create an account and redeem with the code Locked On to save $20 off your first purchase. Jeff and I use this app all the time. It's how we get into Great American Ballpark. I can't tell you the number of times I have used that app while crunching some tacos and drinking a beer in the Dora and then heading across the street. Great deals. Just download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of the Locked On network. Plus, all of the national shows on the network covering every league. Just go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, gang, coming up next week, I think it's safe to tease this now. Next week on Locked On Reds, beginning of the week, I'm not sure if it's going to be Monday or Tuesday, Jeff. You can answer back. But Lucas Sims, closer 1B maybe of the Reds bullpen, joins the show to kick off the week next week.
Yeah, we're going to release this on Monday. It's nice to have him on. We've been able to talk to him the past couple of off seasons, so I'm looking forward to seeing what his thoughts are on all of these additions. I mean, obviously his spot is pretty well set on this roster, but he's got to be feeling pretty good about the guys that are coming into the Reds for this season. So he's going to be on the show with us on Monday.
All right, Jeff, I don't know if you caught this. I'm sure you did, coming across the varied social media platforms, but national prediction of what the Reds rotation and starting lineup was going to look like. And I think they got both of them wrong, because in the rotation, there was no mention of Nick Lodolo. They weren't relying on him at all to be part of this Reds rotation. And if you ask anybody around Cincinnati, including, the Cincinnati Reds, they're going to tell you that Nick Lodolo is on track to be back, to be healthy, to be 100%, and he's going to be in this rotation. So they totally missed the boat on their prediction with Nick Lodolo. And it has me wondering about these national guys and the amount of effort they put in before they put things out there. And to further that along, when they released the lineup, no Christian Encarnacion-Strand, not as a designated hitter, not as an outfielder, not as a first baseman.
I find this interesting because, especially from the Lodolo side, this is not the first time that I've seen someone expect him to not be in the rotation. In fact, the Zips projections for the Reds right now, the early indication of them, have Nick Lodolo only starting about half the games that he pitches in this year. They have him pitching in a decent amount of games, but they only have him starting so many. Like, there's a lot of people that for some reason believe he's going to begin the season as a bullpen pitcher. And I don't know why that's like a narrative. I don't know why that's a thing right now, because if he's healthy, he's in the rotation. I don't see any value to him being a relief pitcher.
No, I completely agree with that. And moving him to the bullpen signals a lot of things. It signals that the Reds front office got it wrong with him, that they don't think he's going to be a viable starter in Major League Baseball. And there's nobody that believes that. There's nobody that thinks that. So I don't know where this is coming from. Everything that Nick Krall has said is the exact opposite of this. Everything that David Bell has said is the exact opposite of this. And really, the moves that they've made with this bullpen and the pitchers that they have in this bullpen, there would have to be a significant money costing cut at this point to make room for Nick Lodolo in this bullpen. So I don't know if this is a speculation on his health by the national guys. And I would listen to that argument. At the end of it, I wouldn't agree with it. I wouldn't agree that there's a scenario where he goes to the bullpen, but I would listen to somebody if they wanted to argue that we don't think he's ever going to be healthy. We think the best the Reds can hope for is to stick him in the bullpen with his limited availability and move on from there. I could see someone making that pitch, but I don't agree with it. I think the highest best use of Nick Lodolo and his talent is a starting pitcher, number 2, number 3 in the rotation, and you just go from there.
And I think too, the thing with CES, they had Jonathan India. So they were looking at the most likely everyday lineup for the Reds. First of all, there's not going to be an everyday lineup for the Reds. There's going to be a lot of different lineups that the Reds use, but they had Jonathan India as the primary DH. And if I'm picking between India and CES, I want CES to get more at bats this year. That's just how I feel about that. And then if you want to say, well, it's between CES and Noelvi Marte, then I still want to see CES more than Noelvi Marte, but I think you can move things around so that CES, Noelvi Marte, and Jeimer Candelario all get at bats in this lineup. I mean, Candelario is going to play mostly every day, and I really think Noelvi Marte and CES should as well. So the fact that CES himself was left off, we're talking about a dude that showed so much power last year that if you're going to revert him to a part-time player, you are going to waste him. He is an everyday player.
Well, and let's talk about the elephant in the room, because the reason that he was not in that lineup is they projected Jonathan India as the designated hitter over Christian Encarnacion-Strand. And that is just lunacy in my mind. There's no scenario where that is the case.
I think there's two reasons. There's two things as to why MLB Network did this. MLB Network projected these starters based on money that they're making and years that they've played. I think that's what it is, because they picked Nick Martinez in the rotation over Nick Lodolo, and they picked Jonathan India in the starting lineup over CES. That's the only reason I could explain that, because I just don't see it. I see there's more upside to Nick Lodolo in the rotation than Nick Martinez. I think Nick Martinez is going to be a very valuable pitcher, but I think his biggest value is kind of going between the bullpen and the rotation. And then obviously just give CES. CES should never come out of the lineup. Unless he's hurt, he should not be out of the lineup.
Interesting with Nick Martinez. If everything goes right for the Cincinnati Reds, and if all of the starting pitchers are the starting pitchers we want them to be, Nick Martinez does not start a game for the Cincinnati Reds in 2024. That's the reality of it. He will be a just strictly bullpen guy if everybody's healthy, and if the starting pitching depth is what we believe it is going to be. He won't even necessarily have to be the guy to slide in if there's a doubleheader, if somebody needs to miss a turn. There will be other guys that they can use. So when they signed Nick Martinez, yes, it made sense, the conversation about him being a starting pitcher. But the Frankie Montas deal kind of changed all of that.
No, I agree with that. And I think that if we were to look at this and say the best case scenario, it means everything's going right. Nick Lodolo's in the rotation. Nick Martinez is in the bullpen. CES is playing every day. Jonathan India fills in where needed. I think that's the best case for this team when you're looking at all of the talent in this. And yeah, Shredded 2000 actually has a good point. CES in right field against lefties. Would love to see it. Would love to see it. He's got a great arm from what we have seen, and I think that he can play a pretty decent right field. The range might be a little bit of a factor, but I just don't see I don't see a scenario where you can take CES out of lineup and say that you have your best lineup on the field.
And Kurt Baker hits a great point as to why I think it's not necessarily going to be Nick Martinez that would slide into the rotation if there's a doubleheader, if someone needs to skip a turn, because Williamson is kind of the odd man out now. He's probably going to start the season at AAA in the bats rotation, and he was showing a lot of progress. He did exactly what you and I predicted he would do, which is work with Derek Johnson and get better every time out. And I think he's probably your sixth guy.
Speaking of Williamson being in Louisville, TJ Leonard a little bit earlier in the show said the Louisville bats have the best rotation in AAA. Yeah, they do. I mean, there's not a guy.
The whole pitching staff.
There's not a guy in that rotation. Like it's so great, and we talked about this ad nauseum, so I'm not going to go crazy with it. But it's so great to see the pitching depth of the Reds, that there are an entire rotation worth of guys in Louisville that if the Reds have to call on someone in an emergency situation, I'm happy that they call on any one of those guys, because the Reds have a lot of talent, even now in AAA, where kind of felt like these last couple of years, AAA was this no man's land of like quadruple A players that we really didn't want to see in Major League Baseball, but they had to fill out a roster somehow. Now the bats really seem to have a lot of talent, and that just goes to show the depth that Nick Krall has built in this organization. But I think that it's clear. You and I both agree. MLB Network snubbed the crap out of CES and Lodolo, and those guys, given health, if they're totally healthy, are gonna be in the starting rotation and in the starting lineup. All right, Steve, it's that time. We got Q's and A's coming up. Your questions, your comments, everything. We're going to be responding to them as we are on this live Aloha edition of the podcast. That is coming up right after this. Because first, we're going to talk about another one of today's sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you in part by FanDuel. FanDuel is the best way to enjoy sports. Look, it's the NFL playoffs. You got UFC 297 coming up this weekend. There's so much that you can get into over on FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, and your first $5 wager that you place is going to get you $150 in bonus bets back, win or lose. Guaranteed. Check them out today. I really enjoy FanDuel. I mean, you talk about all the different sports with the NFL playoffs. We've got the divisional round, 4 great games coming up this weekend. I love throwing a couple of bones on the UFC card that's coming up. Plus, you've got futures. The Reds are still really not getting a whole lot of credit from Vegas. They're not the favorites to win the NL Central, which, by the way, we actually had a conversation with our friend Chuck Freeman over at Locked On Brewers about all of that. He thinks the Reds have a really good shot to win the division. And if you think that, you should go to FanDuel right now and place a bet on the Reds division future, which is at plus 450. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up today. Your first $5 wager will get you $150 in bonus bets back, win or lose. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL and the official sportsbook of Locked On. In between episodes, you can follow Steve and myself. You can follow us on Twitter at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs. You can follow Steve at S. Offenbaker with 2 Fs. And you can follow the show at Locked On Reds. Also, make sure you join the Locked On Reds Discord page. A lot of great folks talking Reds baseball over there. Got the link in the description of today's episode. We'd be happy to have you. And make sure you follow us over at InsideTheReds.com. We're writing about the Reds when we're not talking about the Reds. InsideTheReds.com. Bookmark it today. All right, Steve, we've got folks. They've been active in the comment section. I've been seeing them going on by. Who's leading off here? What we got?
We're going with this because we haven't spent a lot of time talking about this guy, and I have some questions for you along these lines. Alex Watts asks about or makes a statement about Jake Fraley, saying Fraley is his everyday right fielder against lefties, and I'm assuming that over Will Benson. So what's your take on that? And do you think that Fraley is actually going to be around to start the season? I know there's been some national stories now. There were local stories for a while, but national stories talking about the fact that his young daughter is in fact going through a battle with cancer right now. And I don't know that Jake Fraley, and rightfully so, should have baseball as his number one priority. So I'm curious what his availability is actually going to be.
Yeah, that's a heck of a thing, and my heart goes out to him, prayers and sympathies and stuff. And I hate the fact that that is something that we have to discuss when it comes to a guy's availability to play, because it's a game, and ultimately it's not as anywhere near as important as his daughter is. And I hate that he has to go through that. And I really think, if we're debating the merits of them on the field, I think Jake Fraley's a better defender. I think that he has better routes. Well, Will Benson showed a very strange inconsistency with routes to fly balls out in the outfield and things like that. I think Will Benson is a slightly better arm, but I think overall Fraley's a better defender. I think Will Benson's a better hitter. Jake Fraley came up in some clutch moments. He had some clutch RBIs last year, but I also think that's kind of where he bats in the lineup. For some reason, he bats in the middle of the order, and Will Benson bats in the bottom of the order. And I don't necessarily think that's indicative of their talent. I think Will Benson is a better hitter than Jake Fraley is. So I think at the end of the day, it's a little bit of do we have a fly ball pitcher on the mound, or do we have a ground ball pitcher on the mound? Because the Reds, getting Frankie Montas, he is a ground ball pitcher, which is great to see. They need more guys like that. And Andrew Abbott's a fly ball pitcher, so maybe you have Jake Fraley in the game whenever Andrew Abbott's on the mound. But it's hard for me because both are so talented, and with Spencer Steer in the left, and Jake Fraley is a better center fielder than Will Benson is, so you could see him pushing TJ Friedl a little bit there, but I still feel like I want Will Benson over Jake Fraley.
Well, let's stay in the outfield, and nice segue. Interesting you bring up TJ Friedl, because that's the next thing from Kerry. Right now, is there anyone that could replace TJ Friedl in case he can't play? And I'm going to add to that, Jeff, or in case his success against left-handed pitching proved to be an outlier. Is there anybody the Reds can stick out there? And in my mind, for a right-handed platoon right now, the only answer to that is gasp Jose Barrero. And as far as then, if he can't play at all, then you're looking at which of Will Benson or Jake Fraley could fill in center field.
I think then you do see Jake Fraley play in center field, at least against righties. We've talked about this a lot. Jake Fraley, Will Benson, not good against left-handed pitching. It's just not happening. So you're going to be putting your lineup at a disadvantage if you have both of them in there, let alone just one. So yeah, you've got to go with at least one righty there against the left-handed pitcher. That's where we talked about Jose Barrero is going to have his shot. And look, it's not going to be a lot. They don't play. What was it? I looked at the number, and I think that it's something like 33% or 35% of their at-bats last season as a team. Everyone's at-bats put into a jar. 35% of those came against lefties. So you're still talking about 65% of the time you can run Jake Fraley and Will Benson out there. But that still means that there is a small opportunity for Jose Barrero to prove himself a little bit. And as of right now, that's kind of what you're looking at, because then you get into the Stuart Fairchilds of it. Are you going to bring up Blake Dunn super early? What's that going to look like? And I just don't think they're ready to do that yet. And I think that's why we kept saying they needed to make a move for a right-handed outfielder.
All right. Randy checks in and says he cannot wait for the Reds caravan next week, and points out that there are just 69 days to go until opening day. Let's go. And speaking of 69 days to go, the greatest Red to ever wear the number 69 for the Cincinnati Reds.
I didn't know this.
Silvino Bracho, the greatest Red to ever wear the number 69 for the Cincinnati Reds. Unless you think D.T. Cromer from the year 2000 was a better Red to wear the number 69. There's been two.
I just find it fun. Like, come on, there's more people with senses of humor than that. Someone else has got to pick the number 69. But yeah, that's it's interesting that number has only been given out just a couple of times. I think I'm going DT Cromer over Silvino Bracho, but it's a close one. That's a very tough
recency bias.
No, that's why I said DT Cromer over Silvino Bracho.
No, that's why I'm saying Silvino Bracho.
Oh yeah.
Thank you. And by the way, I didn't get to make the joke earlier because you just rolled right into the show, but I want you to know that you do your best work when your mute button is on.
Thanks.
All right. Here's a good question. And I'm going to use Greg as the way, if I can get it to come up on the screen. Greg says he would take Blake Dunn at this point over Barrero. And I saw a couple other comments, Jeff, in the comment section go by talking about who we would replace Barrero with on the roster. People don't want that spot taken up by Jose Barrero. Here's the thing, though. That spot, that 26th man, that last man on the bench is not going to get a lot of playing time. So I don't want that to be Blake Dunn. I don't want that to be anybody that I think is going to be a long-term valuable contributor to the Reds. I don't want that to take away from their development. I don't want that to take away from their ability to get better. I think at this point, unless the Reds went out and got a right-handed power bat that was going to sit on the bench versus right-handed pitching, only play versus lefties, Jose Barrero is probably your safest option to stick down there at the end of the bench, given his positional flexibility, until the Reds made a move for somebody else. I don't think there's another guy in the organization right now that I would swap out, given the playing time restrictions that are going to come along with that particular roster spot.
No, and if you're looking at some guys who are available on the roster, we talked about Michael A. Taylor. He's more defensive than at the plate. So his hitting statistics are probably going to be comparable to, like Stuart Fairchild or something like that. Or if you go get Adam Duvall showed in the past he could play center field, but I don't know that he can play center field now. And if he does, then you're probably talking about a bit of a defensive deficiency out there. That's kind of tough for me because they're already gambling a bit by having Spencer Steer out in left field. And we've talked about, Will Benson struggles a little bit. So if you're going to have one position that you really need to make sure that you're locked down at, you need to be locked down at center field. And Jose Barrero at least has shown a good glove out there. So I think it's still Jose Barrero right now, but yeah, it's a little bit rough for me to really back that idea. I almost would feel better if they go out and they get Michael A. Taylor.
All right. For the audio only folks, we're going to do a wrap here. You folks live with us here on YouTube, stick around. We're going to keep on keeping on for the audio folks. The rest of the Q&A will be a bonus episode in your feed a little bit later today. But before we get out of here, I want to circle back to earlier in the week and address Jeff and I and our egregious error on the career Reds conversation. Yes, we forgot Davey Concepcion. Yes, we forgot Ron Oster. That's on us. Our bad. In my memory, Davey had gone and played somewhere else for a year. Went and looked it up after you guys got in the comment section. You all are absolutely correct. We missed it. We blew it. We're sorry. Our point remains. Barry Larkin will probably be the last career Red. Jeff, any other take on that?
That was something. It's like, yes, there were some career Reds that we forgot, but at the end of the day, it's not that many. It's not like we're missing a whole 26-man roster or something like that of guys that were career Reds during the free agency era. It's just not that common. And that's one of those things that it's fun to talk about. But at the end of the day, I think we're done seeing that. Like, I'd be surprised. The only one I could kind of see is if Tyler Stevenson really kind of balls out a little bit this year, and maybe they give him a long-term deal, and then you can kind of work that long-term deal continuously. But also, good hitting catchers are a pretty hot commodity. So I don't know, man. I don't see it happening. I just don't.
All right. For the audio folks, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Reds. Thanks so much for making us your first listen of the day. Make sure you are subscribed, because coming up next week, Lucas Sims joins us out of the bullpen. We're going to the bullpen, Jeff. We're bringing in Lucas Sims. He's going to talk story with us and tell us how he feels about all of the Reds' recent additions. We'll have that for you coming up next week. Make sure you are here, because we will keep you locked on Reds every single day. All right, gang, let's get back into your questions and comments. This is my favorite part. Thanks you guys so much for being here, joining us on this Friday afternoon. Aloha, and I hope you're not too cold. I'm not too cold, Jeff. Did you know that it's nice and 70?
Oh, stop it. We got snow on the ground. I don't want to hear about what Hawaii looks like.
All right.
And also I've seen some takes on Twitter, and a friend of ours. I know you haven't met Austin Elmore, but I know that you know him, and we work with him on InsideTheReds.com. He had mentioned his affinity for winter weather over summer weather, and he can just get out of here with that. That's a horrible take. It's summer weather all day because, well, you play baseball in summer weather, so why would I like anything else?
Let's go to this, Jeff. This is from Femboy Gaming. How do we think the press will treat the Reds in 2024? He goes on to say, I feel like CES is going to constantly be compared to prime Joey Votto, and the press will be against the team because it's not a big market. So this is a two-part question, actually, or a two-answer question, because there's national press, national media, local press, local media. From the local standpoint, there will probably be some comparisons between CES and Joey. I don't think it's going to be a whole lot. And I think the local media will cover this team how they've always covered this team. There won't be any real changes or any unfair coverage from a local standpoint. Nationally, I will say for the most part, I have been very pleasantly surprised with how the national media has started to pay attention to this team in Cincinnati. I think all of these young players made enough noise in 2023 that they got on everybody's radar. I think they will be a fun side story follow. They're never going to get talked about like the Yankees or the Red Sox or the Dodgers. They're never going to be given that kind of love from MLB Network or ESPN or any of the big heavy national hitters. But they are going to be what they will consider a fun side story until they look up and find that this team has won the division and is making a playoff run. And then they'll treat them a little bit more seriously. But that's how I expect the national media coverage to go.
There's kind of an industry answer for this. From the national press kind of point of view, they have a ranking of the biggest fan bases. It's the same way with football, same way with basketball. There's a reason that we hear ad nauseum about the Lakers and about the Cowboys and about these teams that they aren't who they used to be. But it's because their fan bases are the largest and they're going to get the largest response, the largest group of responses when they talk about those teams. It's the same with the Yankees, same with the Dodgers, same with even the Cardinals have a really big fan base. So they're going to talk about those teams the most. Just get ready for it, because the Reds are going to force their way into the narrative. They're going to force their way into the rundowns of national shows and things like that. But they're going to be talked about as, why aren't the Yankees doing this? Why can't the Cardinals catch these guys? Why have the Dodgers spend as much money to do exactly what the Reds are doing? Like things like that. It's going to be in the guise of, why is this small market team doing what this big market team is doing? Or in the case of the New York Mets, why are the Reds better than the Mets and the Mets have all this money? There's so much that's going to be reported about this team in the national light that is geared more toward larger fan bases. That's always going to be the way of it, because as much as we think that Reds country is all of America, it's not necessarily as big as, Yankees country and all that other stuff, all those people that count the championships and things like that. I think at the end of the day, this team is going to show everyone why they should be covered so much. And that in and of itself is an even better mark of respect than how much coverage that they give those bigger teams. Because when you're a small market team and you force yourself into that conversation, it just shows how good you really are.
Let's go to this, Jeff. We haven't talked about this, and I don't know if you're ready to talk about this, but Ye Old White Dude asks if we've discussed the Amazon Diamond Sports partnership. Says it seems like we still watch locally for the foreseeable future. It is a complicated mess to untangle, but the best read I have on it so far, Jeff, and if you understand it differently, let's talk about it. But my best understanding is this impacts the Cincinnati Reds not at all. It looks like this deal is going to be for Amazon Prime to stream games in the markets that lost their Bally Sports channel, lost their Bally Sports broadcasts. The Reds currently are not one of those markets. They have a large ownership share in Bally Sports Ohio. They are going to continue to broadcast the way they've always broadcast. This deal doesn't impact the country as a whole. It doesn't change blackouts. It doesn't change any of the rules that are currently in place.
Correct. The most recent thing that I have seen is that the Reds are not one of the teams who will be shown on Amazon Prime, which is a bummer, because I'm one of those people that's, done the whole cord cutting thing and trying to work my way around so that I can watch every game. I really hate the idea of just buying cable just to watch the Reds, but that's kind of where we are still at this year. And until we hear any different, that's kind of what we are reporting, what we're talking about with this Amazon deal. I do think that it's a harbinger, and I felt like I said this last year, so who knows? Maybe we'll have another harbinger next year of, hey, maybe next year we'll be able to watch it on streaming. But yeah, as of right now, I don't think anything's changed for Reds fans.
I'm going to use Carrie's question to tease again that Lucas Sims is coming out of the bullpen to be on the show on Monday. But Carrie asks if we can try and get Brent Suter on and have him discuss and do all of the things that Suter does. We're working on it, guys. We're meeting with team executives. We are trying to strengthen what we do for you because we know that's what you want. So it's a work in progress. I can't make any guarantees, but we are definitely working behind the scenes to bring more and more Reds content to you, more players, more coaches, more former players. We're reaching out to anybody and everybody to make that happen for y'all. So rest assured, we are trying.
I have to ask Lucas about that. I think I hear that he and Brent are pretty close. They got in close because Brent has participated in the local Miracle League banquets and things like that, and he's helped out with the Nuxall Miracle League, and so they've become close, even though this is just going to be the first year that they're actually teammates.
All right, Jeff, let's go to this because it's one of your favorite questions of all time. Russell wants to know over under on number of games a winning streak will be in 2024. He's setting the over under at 7.5. So will there be an 8-game winning streak in 2024? What would you do, Jeff?
So this is interesting because last year when they went on the amazing streak that they had, I went back and I looked it up. Since the year 2000, I went back that far. They've had a 10-game win streak in a season only like twice, other than last year. I think it was just a total of 3 times in the last 23 seasons. So it's not a given. Like you think, oh, the team won, had that amazing streak last year. They're just going to do it again, right? Obviously, that's not always the case, but shocker, I'm going to take the over.
I also at 7.5, I will take the over. I think they will squeeze out at least one 8-game winning streak in 2024. I see that happening.
This team is so deep, man.
Yeah,
it's so deep. Like if someone is going to go on a slump, there's going to be somebody that can step in. Now they're not like 2 to 3 deep at every position, but there's a lot of different spots. Like God forbid Ellie doesn't take the step that we see him taking. They can shuffle the infield around a little bit and still have a really strong lineup and give him some rest or, give him some time to figure it out. They can move the rotation around a little bit if somebody gets hurt. They can move the bullpen around a little bit if somebody gets hurt. Nick Krall has built a really good system here. And I think that because of that and the fact that they won, they put together their amazing win streak last year the way that they did without pitching, and now they have pitching. I definitely think they could at least rattle off 8, 9, or even 10 wins.
Ye old white dude follows up with, he was under the impression that this still affects the entire Bally Sports company as a whole. It does. Amazon bought a minority stake in the entire company. However, the only broadcast rights they're able to transition to the streaming platform are from the markets that lost their deals with the teams. So again, it's very limited in the scope of the broadcasting, but Amazon did buy into the company as a whole. And that is important. I want to say that is important because not very far from now, maybe even as early as 2025, there's going to be a complete restructure about how we get our baseball content. Major League Baseball is actively working on this behind the scenes, and there could be a shift. And so I think Amazon is kind of reading the tea leaves a little bit and hoping that by doing this now, they position themselves later to be the streamer for Major League Baseball. So stay tuned on that front. And I agree with Greg. He doesn't care who broadcasts the games. We cannot lose John Sadak. I love John Sadak. Such a great get for the Reds to have him on the TV play-by-play. And I completely agree, Greg. Friend of the show, personal friend to Jeff and I, John Sadak. He's been great to us. He's been great for the city. And he's been great for the broadcasts.
Shout out to whoever mentioned the Reds Fest earlier on, or Reds Caravan earlier on. That begins, I know on Monday they have a stop in Hamilton, and I'm going to do everything I can to be there. And John Sadak is going to be there as well. So looking forward to saying hi to John.
All right. Just some checks in. MLB Network voted the Brewers and the Mets over the Reds, who they picked ninth, in the title drought's most likely to end next list. Brewers and Mets over the Reds. The Brewers aren't even going to be over the Reds in the division. I don't know where this stuff comes from. Again, the MLB Network needs to slow their roll, Jeff. Mets? The Mets don't know if they're coming or going.
And I'm a little interested to see the Met on a much more passive scale than where the Brewers are, because you and I are both under the impression that the Brewers are primed to blow it up this year. I don't think that the Mets are primed to blow it up, but the Mets have a big decision to make this year regarding Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso's in the last year of his deal, and he kind of had a rough year last year, still had over 100 RBIs, but I mean, compared to what Pete Alonso, I mean, he's usually an MVP candidate. He wasn't last year. So there's a little bit of wonder. Are they going to pay him? Are they going to trade him? If they trade him, who else do they trade? Like things like that. They've got enough money that they don't have to worry about the idea of a rebuild, but there's something about the Mets that it's just not going to work out. And that is not coming from me. That is coming from friends of mine who are Mets fans that keep telling me that. Because, like, whenever they had the highest payroll ever last year, I was like, wow, you guys must be pretty excited. They're like, they're going to find a way to mess this up. That's the Mets. They always mess this up.
Oh, my goodness. Let's go to this from Calvin, because I'm kind of curious about this as well. What do you think will be the updated team moniker and home run celebration? He would love for them to bring back America's team, but maybe an update to the Viking celebration. Do you want to run back the Viking celebration, Jeff, one more year, or do they need to do something new?
I think let's read the tea leaves a little bit on the Viking celebration, because it came from Jake Fraley.
Mm-hmm.
And what Jake Fraley's going through right now, what his family is going through right now, I don't see any way that they change that. I think that the Viking celebration is here for at least another year, and I'm okay with that because I kind of love the Viking celebration. I don't necessarily believe that needs to change. What was the other part of that?
The other part of that I'll take, and then you can jump in.
Yeah.
America's team. No, let's get rid of that. I don't want to use that. I don't want to be associated with that, because that is a created, egotistical, inflated head, balloon, self-important statement that was created by the Dallas Cowboys. I want that to get as far away from the Cincinnati Reds as possible. I don't want to be associated with the classic choke in the playoffs team. And if you're a Dallas Cowboys fan, I am coming at you right now. Yes, I am. So let's get rid of America's team. Let's come up with something else. But I am all in on keeping the Viking celebration. I liked it. I thought it was fun. I thought it was led for great pictures. I thought that it made just the right amount of grumpy old men shout at clouds. It did all the things I needed for it to do.
Do we call it choke when you give up 48 points at home to the last seed in the playoffs? Or is it just bad? Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
If there's any Cowboys fans out there, I just had to say that. But we've been talking about Cowboys for a while on Locked On Sports Today, and it's just like, golly, I feel for their fans, man. That just makes no sense. And then they run it back with their coach, and it sounds like they're just going to keep everything status quo.
Love Jerry. Good. Jerry's doing a great job down there.
Did Mike move to Dallas? Did Mike Brown move to Dallas?
Shots fired, folks. All right, back to baseball.
Katie's running the Bengals. We know that.
That's true. Back to baseball. Andy asks, are the Reds a wild card team or a division winner? Our thoughts. I think they're a division winner. And I also am not sure a wild card team will come out of the Central in 2024. So I think division winner or bust may be the answer.
Yeah, I think that I don't know or bust, because I got a hot take. I think the Reds are making the playoffs one way or the other. I think that they're either winning the division or they're going to be a wild card team. They're going to be one of those teams that are up there, and then whoever, if someone is keeping up with them neck and neck, most likely the Cubs, then that team could possibly win the division, and then the Reds get the wild card. But I think that the Reds are making the playoffs. Like I'm almost certain that I'm marking off October, that I'm going to get baseball on my birthday, and I'm going to be super happy about it, because the only reason that I ever get Reds baseball on my birthday is if they make the playoffs.
That's true.
There's been like a couple of years that the regular season like extended to October 3rd, and I was like, this is weird. I don't normally go to the ballpark on my birthday. This is fun. Feel like a leap year, baby.
I always go to the ballpark on my birthday, Jeff. As you know, because you've been there.
I got a summer birthday, and I live in Hawaii. My name's Steve Offenbaker. Hi.
Luke says, does not making a trade for an ace like Bieber in the offseason make a deadline deal more costly, assuming the Reds are in the playoff hunt? I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think that the pitching market is always costly. And to answer this, really, I mean, look at what Minnesota gave up for Tyler Mahle. Look at what Seattle gave up for Luis Castillo. That's the market to go get what you believe will be an arm to bolster your rotation and make a playoff push. We may be seeing the end of starting pitcher trade deals, and it may just become off-season free agent deals and build from within. Unless you're willing to mortgage your entire, future to make an all-in push for a one-time win. I don't know that the Reds will ever be willing to do that. It seems to me the asking prices are going to be just as high. They won't be less. And Nick Krall has shown that he's really not willing to pay those kind of prices in prospect capital for one guy for a rental. So I'm not sure we're going to trade for a starting pitcher.
You want to start the tired narrative now? Best trade deadline acquisition the Reds can make is Rett Louder. The pitcher in organization that they
Chase
can
Chase Petty, Connor Phillips.
No, I don't think they trade for a starting pitcher at the deadline. I do think that it makes it a little bit more expensive at the deadline, although you would get a guy like Shane Bieber with less than 1 year left on his deal. So you might be able to swing a better trade package for the Reds. But I also think that the Reds are going to have so much flexibility at this trade deadline. Plus, with all of the young talent that they have at the starting pitcher position, they're not going to necessarily have to go for that, or they could go for the middle of the rotation guy that is on an expiring deal or something like that, and then trade a lesser package for that kind of guy. I don't think that we're seeing him go for Dylan Cease. I think that what's his name? I was trying to remember it. Chris Getz, the White Sox general manager, is in Delusionville as to what he's asking for Dylan Cease. Somebody might pay that. It's not going to be the Reds. And then I think that the Guardians understood they weren't getting what they wanted for Shane Bieber, so they're going to attach the closer to it so that nobody can meet that asking price, and that Shane Bieber wasn't going to get traded before the season started. So I don't see the Reds making a trade for a big starting pitcher between now and the trade deadline. If they add any more starting pitchers, it's going to be a middle of the rotation type dude.
A couple things for you folks asking about having John on. There's a whole little stretch of comments about having John on. I just took a picture of it and I'm texting it to him, so we'll get it. We'll get it lined up. We'll have John on. Scott, I love this. In 2024, this is from Scott Campbell. In 2024, the Mets have to get past the Braves and the Phillies and fight off the Marlins. The Reds have to make sure their shoelaces are tied. Let's go Reds. I love it. Yes. The National League Central is, in fact, much more winnable than the National League East at this point, or the National League West.
There's not a single team in the West or the East that doesn't wish they were in the Central, because the moves that have been made in the Central are all pointing to the Reds being the best team, because the Cubs haven't gone out and spent like we thought they would. And there's still time to do it. But I mean, we're kind of getting into the late portion of the offseason. And the biggest rumors that I've heard surrounding the Cubs here recently are that they're going to bring back Cody Bellinger, which, don't get me wrong, their lineup was strong with Cody Bellinger, but it's not as if they're getting better. They're just getting back to where they were. Shoto Imanaga replaces Marcus Stroman. Marcus Stroman went to New York. And then who else have they added? They haven't added anybody. So the Cubs haven't gotten better. The Cardinals did what they could just to get back to the middle of the pack of the division. And yes, I mean, back to the middle of the pack of the NL Central, not the middle of the pack of the other stronger divisions. So I still think that this is the Reds division. Like, I know that we talk a lot about the Reds, you and I, because we're here every day, part of the Lockdown Podcast Network, your team every day. But that's not to say that I've just repeated it enough to believe it. I firmly believed this before I repeated it. The Reds should be the favorites in this division.
100%. I absolutely agree. Along the lines of the division talk, and we just talked about this with Chuck over at Locked On Brewers. Which division rival would you least like Joey Votto to join, and
Cardinals?
Why? This is the stinking St. Louis Cardinals would just I could not, and I know
I'd throw up.
I'd throw up. Cardinals. I couldn't stand it. After the Cardinals, the Cubs. After the Cubs, no. Yeah, least likely. So Cardinals, then the Cubs, then the Brewers. And if he had to play in the division, because there's a tradition of it, the Pirates should be where he goes.
I got trolled by Ethan. I believe it was on Discord, on our Locked On Hosts Discord that we have. And it wasn't a Photoshop. It was like a badly Photoshopped thing of Joey in a Pirates uniform. And I was just like, they're not going to do that. The Pirates don't know what to do with free agents. They don't know how to contact free agents. Like, show me some sort of evidence that the Pirates know what free agency is, because they're not doing anything.
This from Doug. He would be shocked if Minnesota ever takes a phone call from the 513 area code again. This in regards to the Tyler Mahle trade. That's probably true. That could definitely definitely left a bad experience all the way around in Minnesota. And nothing against Tyler Mahle. I hope that he comes off his injury and is able to put together a lot of productive years in Major League Baseball, because he was a good dude when we had him.
Current Texas Ranger now. Yeah. I don't know that it's the exact same thing, because the Reds traded what they believed was a old 30 Frank Robinson for somebody. But I think that this is going to be in the same vein of like worst trades that a franchise has ever made. Like the Twins are going to look back on this trade and be like, what could have been? CES and Spencer Steer. And instead we got 3 starts from Tyler Mahle.
Our buddy Ken checks in, Jeff, and says he's never had baseball for his January birthday. And I'm translating this to say that he's taking you and I on a trip to see some Winter League baseball somewhere next January.
Yeah. Got to go down to a tropical country there. I wouldn't hate that.
Let's jump in on this. Dave Brown, we talked about this kind of at the beginning, just in passing, but hater to the Astros, 5 years, $95 million. That's a lot of money, Jeffrey.
What is that? 15?
No. Watch Jeff do math, everybody. Let's wait for him. Wait.
15 million. No.
Wait, there we go.
19 million. 19 million a year.
Oh my goodness, Alabama.
Hey, I went to school in Kentucky as well. But 19 million a year for your closer. The Reds would never do that. The Reds kind of have those spending philosophies. It's funny to like see the different professional teams, because I know our friends over at Locked On Bengals, James and Jake, have talked about this a lot, where, the Bengals don't pay tight ends and the Bengals don't pay guards and things like that. Like, the Reds are never going to pay that much for a closer. I don't, unless inflation gets to the point that that's what it dictates they have to pay. But Josh Hader was wanting an Edwin Diaz type deal. Mm-hmm. He actually got less than Edwin Diaz got, but that's not something that the Reds are like. When Alexis Diaz garners that kind of deal, we're going to be talking about trading him. As much as I hate to say that, because I love Alexis Diaz, but the natural order of things are the Reds look for other relief options once a guy gets that expensive.
Jeff, way back in the cold open of this show, I did mention that we were going to discuss who had the best question or comment of the show, and Doug says Scott wins the best comment of Aloha Friday with the shoelaces comment. And yes,
great,
Scott, you win the title for today. I should have said it at the time. Yes, that was really, really good. This from Calvin: has there been any updates on the Reds training staff or not? The staff can only do so much, but the Reds need to cut down on the number of injuries throughout the year. That would be great. I have not heard of any wholesale overhauls of the training staff. What I did hear last year from sources within the team is that there was some disgruntled folks around the injury results. And this came on the heels of an overhaul to the training staff just a few short years back. So there's not been any leaks from within the team about what they're doing to address this. I think everybody recognized that there were a couple really bad years there of injuries for the Reds. Some of that's just how it's going to go. There's always going to be injuries. You're right. But I hope that the Reds have at least taken a long, hard look at this and put some new procedures, new methods in place to try and limit it. 2023 was better than 2022. So hopefully they are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and that's one of those that I don't necessarily know they make super public whenever they make some changes in the training staff area. We'll keep you guys apprised if we hear anything, but as of right now, I've not heard of any changes.
Mr. E asks, TJ Friedel, 19 bunts again? Listen, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If other teams can't defend it, and if you can get to first base before the ball, you do what you got to do to get on base. I like the element of chaos that the bunting brought to the game. I like that TJ was smart about it when he did it. So if defenses don't adjust, yeah, he should continue to lay it down from time to time and create the chaos.
If he is healthy all year long, plays 162 games, does he go 20-20-20? 20 homers, 20 steals, 20 bunts, 20 bunt hits.
If last season was not an outlier, if that was the real TJ Friedel and he's healthy the whole season, you're right. And I am going to ask Joel, because I won't be able to find that. I'm going to ask Joel if that's ever happened before.
20-20-20?
20-20-20.
Because usually a 20 homer guy is not trying to bunt to get on base. Right.
And speaking of that, great. I love it when you segue and you don't even know it. Carrie says, I want to see Ellie bunting some, add to his toolbox. Do you want to see Ellie De La Cruz bunting, Jeffrey?
I
What do you think?
I wouldn't mind it if he sees an opening. There's something about Ellie that I think people discount, and that is that he is a super smart baseball player. He knows the game. He has a feel for the game. We just didn't see it enough because he struck out a bunch and he had some bad luck with the balls in play and things like that. I could see him doing it. He's not going to do it anywhere near as much as TJ Friedel. In fact, I recall a couple of times him trying to lay down a bunt last season, but it was in like a desperation move or something like that, so it didn't work out. But, I mean, it'd be electric. The idea is get him on base because he does his most damage on base, but he also has just a absolute destruction of worth of a power bat. So you don't want to take that out of his hand too often, but you know, if he has like 5 bunt hits, actually, that'd be kind of cool.
All right, let's get to this. This will be fun. And before we move on from that, yes, if Ellie sees an opening and thinks he can drop one down, his speed, the chaos factor, yes, all those things you just said. David Bell should never one time ever ask Ellie De La Cruz to lay down a bunt.
No. And
totally up to Ellie in the moment. It should not be a call from the dugout ever.
And let's take it to the next level. Those are the only 2 guys we ever want to see dropping down a bunt, and we want it to be of their own accord because they think they can get the first when they lay down that bunt. We're not advocating for sacrifice bunts whatsoever. Lockdown Reds has never been an advocate of sacrifice.
I feel like hashtag Jeff loves Jim Riggleman. I feel like that's what I'm hashtag Jeff loves Jim Riggleman, folks. I want to see that trend on
Jig
X
Riggleman.
today. Jig Riggleman. Yeah, Jim Riggleman. Jesus. All right, let's go to this. Joseph Gaditza asks, who leads the team in bombs in 2024? He says CES with 35.
Okay, so you took my pick. I would pick CES, but for contrarian's sake, I'm going to say that Will Benson leads the team in home runs because he goes off against right-handed pitching this year. He did so good in a limited sample size last season. Could see him leading the team in bombs just because the Reds have a lot of well-rounded line drive hitters. Nobody is actually selling out to hit a home run on this lineup. So while you probably won't see any 40 homer hitters, you're going to see a lot of 20 homer hitters. Like, this team is going to be very well-rounded when it comes to power, but you're not going to see anybody that's like, you know, pushing Barry Bonds.
40 home runs from Tyler. No, I'm kidding. I'm not doing that again. I think CES is the right pick. 35 sounds about right. Might be a little high for, I'm not sure. 30 to 35. That feels right, Joseph. I think that's right. I think Joseph got it right. I agree. CES with 35 seems like where we want to be.
Yeah,
Eric.
This team's going to hit a lot.
Yeah, you're done talking about home runs, Jeff. Do you believe Matt McLain will put up better overall stats in 2024 or take a slight step back as the pitchers adjust? That was my bold prediction for 2024 is nobody is going to sophomore slump. Everybody is going to be better in 2024 than they were in 2023 as far as the rookies go. That being said, I do not think Matt McLain takes a step back. I think we'll see some adjustments in individual statistical categories that result with the same approximate OPS plus WAR finish. I think that's how I want to say that, Jeff. Maybe his slugging goes down a little bit. Maybe his average goes up a little bit. Maybe his on-base percentage takes a move a little bit here, but his total over there kind of adjusts so that he finishes in the same or better range of OPS plus and WAR.
I definitely see his slugging coming down. I don't think he's a 500 slugger, but I don't think it's going to go down gratuitously. Like, I don't think we're talking about barely scraping 400. Yeah, 450 sounds about right. And I can see his average coming up a little bit as he kind of figures out how to be that top of the lineup catalyst and the guy that really gets everything going. But again, I talked about this a little bit in an article and then even on a solo episode the day after we talked about buying and selling small sample sizes, is that I do see Matt McLain evening out in some stats and maybe coming up in others so that his overall performance doesn't quite look as different as it did last year. It's just it's going to look a little bit, varied, I think is the word that I'm looking for. He can do it all. I believe that. He's going to be better at stealing bases. I know that for sure. He said he's been working on it. He's going to steal more bases.
All right, let's do this. While Scott Campbell does a victory lap, let's take two more and wrap it up because we have gone well past the 1 hour mark. Joseph thinks Tyler Stevenson is going to have a big year. We haven't really spent a whole lot of time. We've done a little bit, but we haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about Tyler Stevenson and what we expect from him. I really liked what I saw from him the last third of the season last year. I truly believe, and we're still trying to work on making a connection with him to get him back on the show this offseason because I want to ask him about this. I truly believe he was still feeling the effects of that clavicle break well into the 2023 season. His swing didn't look right. His throws to second base didn't look right. There was a lot that looked wrong with Tyler Stevenson in 2023. And I think that heading into 2024 now, he's healthy. He's completely healed. I liked what he saw. He's catcher number one. None of this first base DH rotational stuff that the Reds tried. He's got his home. He's got his position. He's got his place on the team. I think a big year from Tyler Stevenson is in order.
I definitely don't think we're going to see 30 homers from him. I don't think he's going to go crazy on the power. That's one thing that we definitely got wrong last year when we were talking about Tyler Stevenson approach to the plate. Yeah, you specifically. But I do think that he will improve, especially in the batting average area. He is a guy, and I said this, I think it was last offseason when we were talking about Tyler Stevenson. I still hold to this, that I could see his career numbers looking a lot like Sean Casey's. Decent RBI numbers, decent batting average numbers. The power you kind of think could be a little bit more, but when you're a catcher and if you can hit like Sean Casey, then you're going to be one of the best catchers in the league. And I think that's who he can be. But he was getting really unlucky. It was the shoulder that he was dealing with, and he was getting really unlucky with batting average on balls in play. The only thing that gives me pause with thinking that he's just going to have this meteoric comeback is that he's never been a big average exit velocity guy. Like the hard hit stuff isn't quite there like you think it would be. He's very close to league average. So I'm not going to sit here and say that his power numbers are just going to go crazy and he's going to, challenge the batting or challenge the home run title or something next year. But I do think we're going to see a much better batting average and a much more productive hitter.
Carrie asks if there's any chance either of us are going to spring training this year. I don't have a 2024 trip scheduled per se. I always kind of keep my eye on things. And if the situation arises where I can jump out there for a long weekend, I may do that. I am definitely in town for opening day. You will see Jeff and I wandering the streets of the banks, as is our new tradition. And if you see us, please stop us and say hi and talk baseball. because we love talking baseball with you. That's what we do. I know we'll be there for opening day. I'll be back in June and I'll be back in September. Beyond that, we kind of play it by ear. Jeff, I don't think this 2024 is not in the cards for you this year, right?
No, and I was kind of hoping it was going to be like last year. I said that it was going to be, but I think we're going to have to push that to next year. It's not going to work out this year.
All right, let me look for one more here, and then we will call it a day, Jeff. In the meantime, preview our Monday show one more time.
Yeah, definitely. We've got Lucas Sims coming up on Monday. We're going to ask him about this offseason, how his viewpoint has been as someone that's on the roster and someone who's in the bullpen that did get a lot better and was already pretty good last season. Kind of want to get his take on that as well, because there were some numbers that said that the Reds bullpen was good last year. There were some numbers that said that they weren't so good last year, and get kind of his take on the thing, and a lot more going on. Plus, he just had his second kid, so I'm guessing we're going to talk a little bit about that as well.
All right, here's where we're going to end with one more over-under, because I know that it's your jam. Greg asks over-under for 5 guys. He's setting it at 5. I'm going to tweak it. We're going to go 4.5. 4.5 over-under. Number of players with 25 home runs or more in 2024 for the Cincinnati Reds. 4.5, Jeffrey. Over under.
That's tough because I want to say over, but I think 4.5. I think 4. I think there's 4 guys that hit 25 or more. So I'm going to have to take the under on this one. It's really hard to see that many guys hitting more than 25 home runs, but I mean, you definitely see CES doing that. If Ellie takes that next step like we think we can, he will be one.
Steer maybe.
Steer feels like a 22 to 24 guy. Will Benson, I think, can hit more than 25 home runs. And then I think Matt McClain can get to 25.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably
yeah, I'm with you. I'm taking the under. I listen, I think this group could get there, but I don't think 2024 is the year. I would take the under this year, and depending on how this goes, ask us again for 2025, Greg. I think we're both taking the under.
And we're discounting him because we haven't really mentioned him that much when we talk about the lineup, but I mean, Jeimer Candelario does have power and is a line drive hitter. He has the same similar hit profile.
Carrie is right there with you. This is the comment Carrie just put in the chat.
Yep. Carrie Reinert knows what's up because he has the same hit profile as Nick Castellanos, and we know what Nick Castellanos did at Great American. I think Candelario's got a shot to be a 25 homer guy. I don't know that I'd go so high as 30, but I could see him being that. Ellie will be the X factor in if the Reds hit the over. If Ellie is the Ellie we think he could be, I think we could see 5 guys hitting 25 home runs, but that's going to be there's definitely some ifs in there. So I think I'd have to, if I would put money on it, I'd take the under.
All right, 2 taking the under. That never happens around here. And on that note, that is going to do it for this edition of Locked On Reds, the live Aloha Friday edition. Thanks so much for being here and spending your Friday afternoon with us. Thanks for making us your first listen. Coming up next week, Lucas Sims comes out of the bullpen to talk a little Cincinnati Reds baseball with us. In the meantime, Jeff, what can folks expect from you and I the rest of the way this offseason?
Well, you can expect us to continue to get some guests on here, try and get some players, get some coaches, maybe even get some broadcasters and things like that. They can expect us to be locked in on rumors and murmurings and things going on of possible roster moves that the Reds might have. And you can expect us to be locked on Reds every single day.
Best with the mute button, baby.